Good morning. Welcome to the Unitarian Universalist Church of Eugene. And hello, Zoom friends. We're so glad you are here. Our tech team will be dropping some links in chat for you. A copy of the order of service and a visitor form so that you may peruse those as you will. My name is Poppy Lockridge, and I am this morning's worship associate. For those who appreciate a little help with visuals, I am an average height white woman with short curly hair, and I'm wearing a lot of flowers today. If you are here with us in body today, please know that you may write your joys and sorrows in our book at any time during the service. You will find that on the south wall next to the double doors. If you are joining us virtually today, our chat is open at any time between now and that part of the service for you to share what's on your heart. Let us gather in hope and in peace as we mark this time for worship with the lighting of our chalice, a symbol of our Unitarian Universalist faith. Austin Arrowwood will light the chalice while I read these words by Reverend Dennis. On this unique and lovely morning, we kindle this small flame. In this beloved place we call home, we kindle this small flame. This flame is but a flicker in an all too often dark and cold world. And yet it is this spark that rekindles hope within our hearts and calls us towards compassion and loving action.
I'm the Reverend Dennis Reynolds. I use he, him pronouns. For those who a visual description is helpful, I'm a tallish, getting a little bit more roundish white man with graying, thinning hair and a goatee. And today I'm wearing my favorite shirt in the whole world. It's a blue patterned shirt. The cloth is shwe shwe that I bought in South Africa. And my favorite stole. Well, my second favorite stole. I'll talk about the favorite another Sunday, but it's my Side with Love stole. It's the stole that I wear when you folks are wearing your yellow t-shirts, when we're showing up to take a stand and want to be identified as, I've heard circulates around town when they know we are the love people. And like many of you, I have been seeking and sometimes finding ways to respond to all of this. Well, sometimes I find a hard time not coming up with a swear word for all that's going on and what's rolling out of, or perhaps I should say seeping out of Washington, D.C. these days. And it's not just what's happening out of the White House, but it's in Congress and now, in a scary kind of way, the Supreme Court. But here, empowered by love, we're inspired to take action. Thursday night, many of you gathered here to celebrate that action. We had a pizza party. A number of you were there. And we celebrated the variety of, yeah, go ahead, hands up if you were here Thursday night, or if you put a dot on the thermometer that would have earned you passage to the Thursday night event, right? Terry Wright, who I understand is out there in Zoom land today. Hi, Terry, and thank you for the dot activity that led to a pizza party celebrating the many ways people here have spoken out, have stood up, and have acted out. On Thursday night, we even played a bingo game where you tried to spell act up, because we want to do just a little bit of what we call good trouble. We speak up, we act up, because our deepest values call us towards action. Action can serve as an antidote to fear and to despair and to anxiety. My Buddhist teacher Thich Nhat Hanh advised that what is most important is to not allow anxiety about what happens in the world to fill your hearts. If your heart is filled with anxiety, you will get sick and you will not be able to help. Our own Unitarian Universalist faith calls us to action, to side with love. Reverend Carolyn Colbert, my mentor minister who served this congregation for 9 years and described herself as a birthright Universalist. Prior to merger, both her mother and her father were ordained Universalist clergy. Well, Carolyn would begin many a Sunday with these words: "We are loving and caring people, yet sometimes we forget. We come together in church to remember. Let us remember our calling, and let us remember the love." The words of that hymn are from St. Francis of Assisi, as are the words of our reading this morning. Lord, make me an instrument of your peace.
Where there is hatred, let me bring love.
Where there is offense, let me bring pardon.
Where there is discord, let me bring union.
Where there is error, let me bring truth.
Where there is doubt, let me bring faith.
Where there is despair, let me bring hope.
Where there is darkness, let me bring light.
Where there is sadness, let me bring joy.
Grant that I may not so much seek to be consoled as to console.
To be understood as to understand.
To be loved as to love.
For it is in giving that one receives.
It is in self-forgetting that one finds.
It is in forgiving that one is forgiven.
It is in letting go that one becomes open to accept.
It is in dying that one awakes to eternal life. Thank you, Poppy. Now, I first learned that hymn decades ago, the first time I tried to become a meditator. I was taking a meditation class, and they suggested that we try to memorize that poem as a way to quiet my busy monkey mind that chatters when I sit in silence. It didn't work all that well. It took me many years to begin a meditation practice, and I still share time with that monkey who chatters. But I remember the essence of that piece still. Lord, make me an instrument. I have to admit, I paraphrase it somewhat to, may I do good in the world. May I do good. I find the exemplary model of St. Francis of Assisi particularly inspiring. That individual who humbled himself and spent as much time as he could in communion with the natural world. I have a statue of that saint out in my yard. He's holding a concrete bird in his concrete hand. And every day I look out my kitchen window, and St. Francis metaphorically feeds the birds while I provide seed and suet. That's one of my beginning ways of how to do good in the world, to simply feed the birds. Now, when the recently deceased Pope Francis I chose that name as his papal name, I paid more attention than I had in a long time to what was going on in and out of the Vatican. He was a remarkable individual. His elevation to the papacy was historic. He was the first Jesuit, an order known for focusing on teaching. He was from Latin America, where a liberatory theology that focused on serving the poor and marginalized had emerged. Now, few would describe Pope Francis as a hardcore liberation theologist, but that theology shaped much of what he did and said. He said, "Concern for the poor is in the gospel. It is in the tradition of the church. It's not an invention of communism and not be turned into an ideology, as has sometimes happened before in the course of history." Those words about ideology certainly seem prophetic today. In 2015, he issued an encyclical titled Laudato Si, which translates to Praise Be Thee. It was subtitled On Care for Our Common Home. In it, the Pope criticizes consumerism and irresponsible economic development, laments environmental degradation and global warming, and calls all people of the world to take swift and unified global action. People of all faiths were inspired by the Pope's writings. On Whidbey Island, where I was serving as the minister to the Unitarian Universalist Congregation, an interfaith group, we would meet each week in different churches to study a chapter of Laudato Si. Chapter 2 was specifically significant to me. It was a way to talk to fundamentalist Christians about earth care, because the Pope gave specific citations one might refer to. The encyclical was something remarkable. Pope Francis was someone remarkable. I remember him too as the one who, when asked about blessings for LGBTQ folks, answered with, "Who am I to judge? Who are you to judge? You're the Pope." I thought that's what the Pope was supposed to do. Well, not Pope Francis. My Whidbey Island Quaker friend Tom Ewell wrote that Pope Francis was trying to show the world with consistent and humble intent that we can stand up to the temptations of privilege and power as he did by his clear and courageous teaching and by embracing practices consistent with his message, and we can do the same. We too can learn to walk humbly and persistently into a future ultimately emanating from the love and mercy which is part of the prophetic tradition. I am grateful for this prophetic tradition, and I pray that will somehow continue to challenge us and inspire us to follow it. It seems now that the new American and naturalized Peruvian Pope Leo XIV is not wholly dissimilar from Francis. Pope Leo, born Robert Prevost, some of his friends reportedly still call him Bob. Some have suggested we might think of him as Pope Bob. And he's still a White Sox fan. Now, my baseball fans tell me that's clearly an act of profound faith to stay committed to that tradition. He's also a grandchild of a mixed race Creole family that came north with many people of color during the Great Migration of the early 20th century. By the way, there's a report that in 1910, his grandfather was listed in the census as a black man from Haiti. In the following census, that's 1900, but in the 1910 census, he was listed as a white man from the Dominican Republic. I suspect he had passed what was established in those times as something called the paper bag test. If you were lighter than a paper bag, you were white. If you were dark as or darker, you were not. Such is the history of racial identity in America. The Pope, now the Pope, began his clerical career doing missionary work in rural Peru. And he came up through the ranks to the highest level in the church. And yet he still, like me, does Wordle every morning. How many of you join with the Pope and I in doing Wordle, right? So who knew we had that much in common with the leader of the Catholic Church? In the past, we probably didn't. He may be just the Pope we need for these times. In an editorial titled, "Trump is no longer the most important American," the writer David French offers that as one American steps onto the world stage as a man of malice, another American answers leading with love and compassion. They represent two starkly different visions of American character, and if all goes well, Leo will command the world stage long after Trump is gone from public life. Yeah. Amen, brothers and sisters and siblings. I don't know what kind of Pope Leo will ultimately become, but I feel that he's felt the cultural winds shift a little bit, French continues. An American man who confounds political categories now leads the world's largest church. As a friend texted me right after the Pope's selection was announced, that shift almost feels like hope. French asserts that the new Pope's views certainly do not fit within an ideological frame. While many progressives appreciate his position on climate and global economic realities, his views on the role of women, on abortion, on LGBTQ issues, echo the conservative values of that church. Even when I disagree, I know his views are shaped by his sense of values rather than being merely transactional. I know I certainly can use more hope, or even more almost hope, in these times. For the messages of malice that came streaming out of Washington, D.C. can sometimes seem overwhelming. Hope and faith, especially when grounded by a strong moral foundation of core beliefs, is what I and the world most need right now. United by love, we can begin to identify and work with our differences, across our differences, and move forward. I hang on to hope, grounded by faith, because I have witnessed others whose faith-based work made a profound difference in the world. In particular, I want to lift up this morning a couple of powerful and inspiring Catholic women who have had the blessing to know. Sister Simone Campbell and Sister Priscilla Dlamini. I met Sister Simone while I was serving on Whidbey Island, serving our Unitarian Universalist congregation there. She was invited to speak by that same interfaith group that had put together the Laudato Si study group. She shared with us stories from her work as part of a group of nuns called Nuns on the Bus. They were a group of activist nuns who traveled the country advocating for loving and compassion love and compassion within and around the political process. Their focus areas have been support for the poor and immigrant rights. Last fall, their bus tour was focused on registering voters. Not long before coming to Whidbey, Sister Simone had been part of a delegation that welcomed Francis when he came to visit in the United States. Her dedication and her commitment to justice certainly was in line with those liberationist theologies that I had studied at my Unitarian Universalist seminary. Now, the strongest practitioner of faith-based justice work I've been blessed to know is Sister Priscilla Dlamini. I had the good fortune to know Sister, to get to know Sister, as we called her, over a period of years. I had heard of her first when my daughter Lindsay, then an undergraduate student, made a research trip to Holy Cross Hospice in South Africa in 2004. I spent time with Sister there in 2009 and in 2013. Sister, who has been given numerous humanitarian awards for her work, describes the beginning of her programs. She wrote, or she said, "I've had a vision of it for about 10 years, but of course, being a nun in a convent, I wasn't allowed to start anything. What I'd been seeing here were people coming back home from the big cities, already infected with AIDS and HIV. KwaZulu-Natal, the province where I live, has been known as the AIDS belt. It was a thorn in my flesh when I saw those people being rejected by the hospitals and as well by their families. After being rejected, they went to the sugarcane fields to die alone. I had a vision that I must give these people a home to die in peace, to have a dignified death. So I started going out to the chiefs and to ask them if I could start something like that, and they allowed me. I was going from field to field looking for the people who were dying there by themselves. The bishop at the time was also well-versed in social development, so he took me around to look for a place to start this mission. We found an old, dilapidated building that used to be a stable. The bishop was reluctant to give me that space because it was really, really bad condition. But eventually he agreed, and after a lot of work, we were able to admit our first patients, people with AIDS, as well as those with chronic and terminal ailments like cancer. Sister started that hospice, Holy Cross. I first visited there in 2019. By then, Sister had established a creche, which is the South African word for a preschool. It existed to take care of the younger children who were being raised by their older brothers and sisters in child-headed households, so that the older siblings could go to school. I then was administering child care programs at the U of O so mom and dad could go to school. Supporting programs that help people access education was, like, for me, a no-brainer, and I offered to help in every way I could. When I visited Holy Cross, I had the opportunity to provide training for Zulu preschool teachers on neurodevelopment. Well, they taught me so much about community. I spent more time with Sister Priscilla over the years. She came to Eugene once as part of a U.S. fundraising trip. There's a few in this congregation met her when she spoke in our church up in the South Hills. And many of you have bought Zulu beadwork over the years to support the projects that Sister Priscilla began. I also got time with her to travel with her in South Africa, and I've taken additional trips to Holy Cross. Sister died in 2024. Now, sometimes I think of Sister Priscilla as a saintly superhuman, but I spent enough time with Sister to know that she was fully human. She could be kind of bossy. Well, sometimes more than kinda. And she got grumpy when dinner was late. And she had a too large collection of ceramic and toy penguins. I don't know why, but Sister loved penguins. And she had a minor addiction to televised worldwide wrestling. It was Sister's guilty privilege, her guilty pleasure. Yet this fully human being who had dedicated her life to her Catholic faith was called by her deepest values to make the world a better place for sick people and for their children. Instead of being deterred by parochial and cultural barriers to her vision, she made action her prayer and her sacrament. Her actions strengthened the commitment of many of us who sought to help her in the work. Faith-empowered justice work is like that. The church, Reverend Martin Luther King Jr. said, must be reminded once again, it is not to be the master or the servant of the state, but rather the conscience of the state. The conscience of the state. That's what we're called to be and to do in these troubling times. Church is a container to hold values, a container for community and a container for faith. That's true in the Catholic Church. That's true in the progressive Christian church. That's true in liberal faith communities across traditions. And it's true in the Unitarian Universalist Church. It's about what we do, not just what we believe. It's not about the orthodoxy of one's beliefs, or rather about the orthopraxy of one's actions. True action is far more important than belief. We UUs proudly proclaim ourselves as a church where deed is far more important than creed. I offer that Sister Priscilla put into action the Hindu teacher Gandhi's admonition to be in the world what you want to see in the world. She acted to put into action her deepest calling. And we are called. For some, that call comes from within, that deep inner voice. For others, it comes from out there, a power at a distance that I label the mystery. However we are called by faith in many ways, large and small, to do our part. So listen to your calling, whatever its source, and then act to do good in the world. For some, it's advocacy. For some, it's political action. For some, it's service to the community or to this beloved congregation. For some, it's generosity, both financially and by offering a generosity of spirit to cut each other and sometimes ourselves a little bit of slack. For some, it's all of the above. Be in the world who you are called to be. I'd like to close this morning with the words of Hildegard of Bingen, an amazing mystic theologian and powerful voice in the 12th century Catholic Church. She called us to dare to declare who you are. It's not too far from the shores of silence to the boundaries of speech. The path is not long, but the way deep. You must not only walk there, you must be prepared to leap. You must not only walk there, you must be prepared to leap. So, my friends, be prepared to take a leap of faith. May it be so. May we together make it so.
As we weather words of change, may we have the wisdom to cherish moments of stillness.
As we recollect times of challenge and pain, we remember also the blessings of our life.
As we look to future unknowns, may we have the boldness to trust that there is an unimagined good yet to come.
Salam.
Shalom.
Amen.
Blessed be.
We extinguish this flame, but not the light of truth, the warmth of community, or the fire of commitment. These we carry in our hearts until we are together again.
I'd like to invite you to just be seated again. I invite you to be seated again for a moment and let the music of the postlude wash over you.